Okay, folks, we're going to go live on Castanet in about 60 seconds, so I ask that everyone please be quiet and also that you find a seat. It is now 7 o'clock. So candidates come to the back of the hall, and we are ready.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Penticton Herald's Federal All Candidates Forum. And a special welcome to those watching at home on live stream, courtesy of Castanet. I am Dory Leonello, the president of the South Okanagan Real Estate Board, and we are pleased to co-sponsor tonight's event with the Penticton Lakeside Resort, which provided this beautiful facility. We remind all audience members to please silence your mobile devices. We also ask that audience members be respectful of all the candidates. Booing and shouting comments from the audience will not be tolerated by our moderator. Tonight's forum will be 2 hours in length. We will not be having an intermission. Candidates have met with the organizers in advance and have agreed to all of the ground rules. Without any further ado, please help me welcome to our stage moderator James Miller, the Valley editor of the newspaper group, and the candidates.
I have my own microphone, so I won't use the lectern. I don't know, candidates, what do you say? What do we want to just talk about Alice Cooper for the next 2 hours? How's that sound? And classic rock. Thank you for Penticton for coming out to the Penticton Herald's All Candidates Forum for the federal election. Last time, which was, I guess, 4 years ago, goes by really quick. There were 23 of these events because the riding geographically is very, very, very large, as the candidates are quickly learning. And I'm very happy to say that of the 23 meetings, ours was by far the best attended. No one else was close. So thank you, Penticton, for supporting our events year after year after year, whether it's municipal, provincial, federal, city council, mayoral, by-elections. We're glad to put it on for as long as you keep coming out. Thank you. Thank you to the Real Estate Board and to the Lakeside for again sponsoring our events. We can't do it without them, so at least on this scale, so thank you very much. And also, just to repeat what the intro had said, and thank you for the lovely introduction. We ask, I know all the candidates, I've met them, some I've just met this year. I know they're really, really nice, quality people. The undecided voters, you're going to really have a tough decision ahead of you. We're almost less than 3 weeks away. This is day 21 of the campaign. So please make them all feel welcomed, whether they're your party or your candidate of choice. They're all great people, and it's hard to come up here and do this, especially with my Shark Tank over there at the media table that's going to ask hard questions. And candidates, we had planned on having individual mics, so you will have to get up and down to the lectern closest to you throughout the evening. And we'll explain the ground rules as we go. We drew for speaking order for a three-minute introduction. And the first-time candidate also drew the first card. So please welcome from the People's Party of Canada, Mr. Sean Taylor.
Thanks, James. Hello, Penticton. My name's Sean Taylor. I grew up in Vernon, BC. Graduated in '91 from Fulton. Go Maroons. A little bit about me. I had a varied work history. I spent about 10 years in the kitchen. Built houses for a while. Had my own company servicing boat lifts throughout the Okanagan for a while. I had a daughter, Alyssa, born in 1997. In 1999, I moved to Calgary. I did my emergency medical technician at SAIT there. I moved to Northern Alberta after that and worked Advanced Life Support Air Ambulance, flew all over northwestern Canada, and was a member of a couple volunteer fire department rescue places. After 2 years in high level, kind of missed the world a little bit, came back to Calgary. I did my Bachelor of Nursing, and when I got into school, I knew that I'd be static for a little while, so I joined the Canadian Armed Forces. I joined the Calgary Highlanders, a local light infantry unit there. And during school, I did the military at nights, on weekends, and during the summer. I graduated with distinction in 2005, and have been an emergency nurse since, working a little bit at Alberta Children's. In 2008, I went and did some extra training with the military in psychological operations and started my workup training and deployed to Afghanistan in 2009 2010, where I was second in command of a tactical psychological operations team that worked with the Canadian Battle Group with the 1 PPCLI battle group based out of Kandahar. After getting back, I worked nursing contracts all over Western Canada. In 2015, I decided that I'm the healthcare guy in the family, and it was time to be closer, to be more supportive to my family, and I came back home. And I've been working for Interior Health since, in Kelowna, Vernon, and Penticton, in the hospitals there. 2015, I started paying a little closer attention to the news, and I was shocked at what I was seeing, what was going on with my investments in the Canadian energy space, and the dialogue that was happening. There had been a culture shift. I was busy working, busy doing life, and I think, like a lot of Canadians, it's sometimes easier not to watch our political process here. Trying to get a grip on what it was that I was seeing, I started doing some more research. I came across people that were shouting truth to power, a couple of them Canadians, Jordan Peterson, one of them, Dave Rubin, the Weinstein brothers, and I came across Maxime Bernier. And for the first time in my life as a Canadian, I heard a politician saying things that resonated with me, right? I think this election in 2019 is about leadership. When I hear the Prime Minister of my country say that we have no Canadian identity and we're a post-nationalist state, that frightens me and angers me.
Right? And then I entered politics. Still good. It was at a time when the Harper government was ignoring science left, right, and center, where scientists were being muzzled, some of them my own colleagues that worked for the federal government. So I entered politics specifically to be a voice of science in Ottawa. And I was fortunate enough 4 years ago to be elected as your MP. And over the last 4 years, I've learned a lot about how to become an effective MP, both in Ottawa and here in this riding. In Ottawa, I was the vice chair of the Natural Resources Committee. I worked in a collegial and collaborative way in Ottawa to make sure that I could represent the priorities of my priorities and the priorities of this riding there. I tabled 6 private members' bills in Ottawa and managed to get 3 of them put into practice by the government, and that's an enviable record for any MP. Thank you. One of those bills closed a major loophole in the Species at Risk Act that had allowed the Harper government to not list any species the whole time it was in power. And another encouraged the government to use more wood in infrastructure that helped the forest sector and also helped us in our efforts to reduce carbon emissions. So I accomplished a lot in Ottawa, and I accomplished a lot here in the riding. I brought in millions of dollars of federal funding into the riding, including $20 million to help the citizens of Grand Forks rebuild after their catastrophic floods last year. And as you may know, every year I've taken a week to cycle around this beautiful riding, cycling from Chute Lake down to Suias, from Big White down to Rock Creek, over to Christina Lake, from Nakusp down through the Slocan Valley, and on to Castlegar Trail, Rossland. And, you know, as I cycle along, I often think of the words of the Okanagan song. It's a song you often hear before every major event here in the valley. And it's got very profound words. The words are, "We are Okanagan, we are beautiful, and we are beautiful because our land is beautiful." And so I pledge to you that I will continue to do my part to make sure that this land is not only prosperous, fair, and just, but that this land, this country, remains the most beautiful country in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And drawing the fifth and lucky spot, our last opening remarks, our Liberal candidate, Ms. Connie Denisek.
Thank you. Thank you, James, and thank you to all of you for being here this evening, and thank you to the panelists as well. I believe that there is a lot at stake in this election for Canada, for families, for seniors, and for everyone here in the South Okanagan West Kootenay. I am a bold and effective leader. I was locally elected 7 times to serve the best interests of students. I was also elected to lead the organizations that I served, including the School Board, BC School Trustees Association, and the Okanagan College Board of Governors. I know how to get things done, and I never forget the interests and the voices that I represent. The Liberal record over the last 4 years has inspired me to put my name on the ballot. Now, my opponents are going to try to make you believe that the Liberals have not kept their promises. Well, in fact, 92% of the promises made in 2015 are either completed or in progress. My opponents may try to make you believe that life is less affordable. Again, that is simply untrue. 9 out of 10 families are further ahead than 4 years ago. The average family in this riding receives over $600 per month in the Canadian Child Benefit. 900,000 Canadians are no longer in poverty, thanks to the Canadian Child Benefit, which has lifted 300,000 children out of poverty. Also, the increase to the seniors' guaranteed income supplements. My opponents might say that the economy has been managed poorly. Once again, not true. Canada has had the fastest growing economy in the G7 nations. Wages are rising faster than the cost of living, and our debt to GDP ratio is shrinking. We have the lowest unemployment in 40 years. We have an expansive riding with an inherited infrastructure deficit. We have been underrepresented by our Member of Parliament with the third-party status. Conservative governments don't invest in infrastructure. Instead, they favor austerity, cuts in service, and hand out tax cuts for the wealthiest Canadians. The Liberal vision for Canada is based on strengthening our economy and investing in Canadians, like taking serious action on climate change and increasing support for students and seniors while helping small businesses and families to get ahead. I have spent my life in the South Okanagan. I know this riding, its people, and our issues. My candidacy is about working hard in a riding that I know and that I love. I will boldly stand up for the people in the South Okanagan West Kootenay as your champion in Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to part 2 of tonight's forum, and that is our questions and answers. The format is the question will be coming from one of our 3 media all-stars, who I'll introduce in a moment. The candidates have 60 seconds to offer a reply. They get a warning bell at 45 seconds and then a double bell at 60 seconds. Some questions may be for the individual candidate, some may be for the entire field. We will alter the speaking order as often as we can. New this year is each of the 3 candidates, I hope you have your playing cards, they have 3 challenge cards. So at any time in the evening, if they wish, they can just wave at me or throw the water bottle or whatever, and they can either rebut a statement or they can add 60 seconds on to their speaking time at any time. So we'll see how it goes and hope for the best. Please welcome our first media all-star, and she is with CBC Radio. Please welcome Ms. Sarah Penton.
Check. Okay, it's on. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody, for coming. I would like to talk first off about universal drug coverage in Canada. It has been under consideration for more than 50 years. A federal advisory panel released a report in June saying that this country should implement a universal, single-player public pharmacare program. In its release, the advisory panel said about 20% of Canadians have inadequate drug coverage or no coverage at all, and that almost 1 million Canadians had cut their household spending on food and heat to pay for medication. It also says Canadians with existing coverage would be better off under national pharmacare. Families would save $350 a year on average, businesses $750 a year per employee. It's estimated a national pharmacare program would cost $15 billion a year once it's implemented. So what is the best way forward when it comes to the rising cost of medicine in this country? Should a national pharmacare program be implemented, and if so, how?
And that's for the field, Sarah?
Yes, this is the panel question.
Panel question. So we'll start with Richard Cannings and then go to his left.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and what a great question to start. She said that it had been on the books for 50 years. We've been asking this question, why don't we have full pharmacare in Canada? And that was because back 50 years ago, the NDP, Tommy Douglas, put forward the idea of universal health care, and this was part of it, and it's never been implemented. And so the NDP has been pushing for this for 50 years. We've certainly, in the time I've been in Ottawa, we've been pushing it very hard. We have come up with a plan that first of all, the parliamentary budget officer says that we would save $4 or $5 billion a year, a year, if we had a single-payer public pharmacare plan. So it's kind of a no-brainer. We have to do this. 10% of Canadians can't afford to fill their prescriptions. Hundreds of young to middle-aged people in Canada die every year, people with type 1 diabetes, because they can't afford adequate insulin. This is something that we should have done long ago, and we have a plan to do it next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Connie Denisek.
Thank you for your comments and the question, Sarah. I don't think any person in Canada should have to choose between heating their home or feeding themselves and their prescription drugs. So I certainly am thrilled that that's part of our platform. Richard mentioned that the NDP have been wanting this for 50 years and have been unsuccessful in getting it implemented, and now the Liberal government has it in our platform, and it's a real possibility for Canadians. So what we're going to be doing is working with provinces, because again, this is something that, healthcare is something that is negotiated between the federal government and the provinces, and so we will be sure that we begin those consultations. Now, some provinces are a little more reluctant. Some of the conservative provinces will be a little more difficult to deal with, but I would see that here in British Columbia, we're going to see implementation very quickly, and it's something that's time has come, and I'm proud that the Liberal government is planning on implementing this. Thank you.
Tara Howes.
As I recall, the question was, how do we plan on lowering the price and keeping it low? The Green Party supports developing a crown corporation to allow for bulk purchasing of drugs, which will also facilitate patent issues. As a personal note, I feel it necessary to share that I actually have an autoimmune condition called lupus. I am on prescription medications for the rest of my life. This is a personal issue for me. I know how much drugs cost, and it affects myself and my family. And I would promise to be sure to uphold this type of initiative in Parliament. Thank you.
Helena Conans.
A universal pharmacare program is obviously important at some point, but how are we going to pay for it? With debt, more debt, larger deficit? As I mentioned earlier, our team has knocked on over 30,000 doors. What they're saying at the doors is they're saying they actually want a doctor. Did you know that there are over 10,000 people between Summerland and Soyuz that don't have a doctor? I can't imagine how many in this room don't have one right now. How can we implement this system if we don't have this, because we have a gateway system in our medical system? How can we implement it if people do not have doctors that can give them a prescription for their medicine? We need to solve that problem first. Then we need to find a way to pay for something like this without increasing our deficit and debt, so that our children and grandchildren will be paying this off for years to come.
Thank you. Sean Taylor.
Should we implement a universal health pharmacare plan? Absolutely not. Okay? Healthcare is provincial jurisdiction, and Ottawa meddling does nothing but create redundant bureaucracies and make things more expensive. Right? Under the PPC platform, we want to simplify things to be able to encourage provinces to be innovative and solve their own regional problems. That doesn't mean we can't facilitate interprovincial buying cooperation to reduce prices, but the last thing we need is the federal government being more involved in healthcare. It's not surprising that my colleagues up here want to create more government programs and create more of a bureaucracy, but that's not what we're about, right? We're about smaller government, streamlining things, and giving power back to provinces to make their own decisions.
All right. We have our first challenge card of the night, so 60-second rebuttal from Richard Cannings.
Yeah, well, I think this is such an important issue, I'm squandering my card right away. First of all, redundant bureaucracy, that's what we have now. We have every province has their own bureaucracy. We have thousands of insurance companies across this country buying drugs on their own to give to people on their plans. We need a single payer plan that would save us, as I said, $4 billion. It's not going to cost more. And the other point I wanted to make, you know, the Liberal candidate said that they are going to implement it. They say they're going to take the first steps to implement it. And that's what they've been saying for years. And what they will implement is a patchwork, you know, covering the people that don't have coverage now, and that will cost us more. We need a single payer, public, free pharmacare for all in Canada. Thank you.
Helena, tear the card in two, please.
I'm going to go back to the question, how is this going to be paid for? The Liberals and the New Democrats how will they plan to pay for this? Are they going to put it on the backs of business as they do, or small business as they tend to do over and over again? Or are they going to raise our taxes, deficit, our debt? There's no plan to pay for this type of system. And so, you know, we can promise a lot of different things, but if we don't have a plan to pay and we raise our debt and our deficit for our children and our grandchildren to come, they're going to be paying, and they're the ones that are going to suffer.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah has a follow-up.
And I just have one follow-up question to continue on with what Helena was saying. I would like to ask Richard Cannings. Jagmeet Singh has said that he would like the National Pharmacare program to be implemented within 1 year. The Liberals have said they would start a down payment, and their $6 billion election platform would be for all of their health care promises. But Richard Cannings, I'd like to know, because it's expected to cost $10 billion a year for the initial startup, can you tell me where the money would come from?
Well, I'll say right off, just to respond to Helena's comment about how it's going to cost businesses. Right now, businesses are spending about $9 billion a year in payroll taxes to pay for the extended health coverage that gives people the pharmacare coverage. So they will be saving that money right away. It'll be a big savings for companies. That cost will be taken on by the government. The NDP plan to pay for that is through one of two things. Right now we have an expanding gap between the wealthy and the poor in Canada. The rich are getting richer. We want to tax the top, not 1%, the top 0.1% of Canadians, those that have wealth of over $20 million. We are going to tax them 1% of that wealth each year, and that will raise that amount for Pharmacare for All.
Thank you. Just a reminder to candidates, if you do want to challenge, just kind of wave at me, and then when you're done, please tear your card in half. All right, we have a new topic and a new panelist. Please welcome the city editor of the Penticton Herald and a 2017 nominee for Canadian National Newspaper Award for reporting, Mr. Joe Fries.
Thank you for that terrific introduction, James. This is another question for the panel. In its July monetary policy update, the Bank of Canada projected real GDP growth to average 1.3% in 2019 and about 2% in 2020 and 2021. That sounds good on paper, yet all the major parties say they would run deficits for the foreseeable future. So if this isn't the right time to balance the federal budget, when is?
And we are switching the speaking order, so we'll go first with Connie Denisek.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. Now, I'd like to just begin by expressing that the growth in GDP is a true test to the economy, the booming economy that we now have. As I said, the fastest growing economy in the G7. And what happens when the economy grows, it allows us to grow the pie. So, as I mentioned earlier, our debt to GDP continues to shrink. And our plan, the Liberal plan over the next years, is to gradually decrease the deficit. And part of the reason we can do that is because we have grown the economy. Our debt to GDP is actually a third of what it is in the United States and a half of the average in the European Union. So we know we're on the right track. We've invested in the middle class. We're investing in infrastructure. As a matter of fact, we're dealing with many of the infrastructure deficits in Canada that have been neglected over the 10 years of Conservative government. And so we're getting, sort of making up for those 10 lost years, and gradually will return to the balanced budget. And you'll see that in our documents. Thank you.
Tara Howes, Green Party.
This is the time to be investing. We've got this extra money. We need to be investing in infrastructure and services so that when we do come to a time, our population is healthy and better suited to deal with any type of economic crisis. I'd also like to point out that the Green Party actually supports shifting from the strict GDP measurement to actually understanding our well-being, which would include our social well-being, our environmental well-being, and it goes beyond just simply looking at the economics. Thanks.
Conservative Helena Conans.
The Liberal government has a $71 billion deficit after 4 years, even though that Justin Trudeau promised to balance the budget. So that's a very big promise, obviously, that has been broken, and others will continue to be broken. what I'm hearing at the doors is that people don't feel good about the economy. We can read as much as we want about surveys and what the economists are saying, but they're scared at the doors. They're wondering whether they're going to be able to pay for their kids' hockey, whether they're going to be able to afford the good food at the grocery stores. Everyone here knows how much food is costing and fresh fruit is costing, fresh vegetables are costing at the grocery stores. So that's what I'm hearing at the doors. So there may be some good news by the university professors or the people who are doing the studies out there, but people are scared and they want to make sure that the government is living within its own budget, just like we all have to live within our budgets.
Thank you. Sean Taylor, PPC.
I'll probably just give you this now. Yeah, things are great, right? Budgets balance themselves. We're the only party that's promising to balance the budget within 2 years. Andrew Scheer made this promise a couple of years ago as well with Max, but he's asking for 2 terms now. All the promises that they're getting, I don't know if you're familiar with our tax plan. We've simplified it. We've increased the basic minimum from 12,700 to 15,000. 15,000 or 15% on anything over up to 100,000. 25% on anything over 100,000. We're going to completely abolish corporate welfare and subsidies and get rid of the capital gains tax. Okay? But we're going to do that after we balance the budget. Okay? These things take time. You don't get money for nothing. Right? The Liberals have been running a massive deficit. The Harper government before, on the good times, on the bad times, except on the election years, they managed to balance it. Right? We're doing things a little different. I used my card.
Yep, 60 seconds more.
Yeah. We need to stop enslaving ourselves in the future. Right? Our kids are going to be paying for this. The deficits that we're running, like. You can only tell us the economy is doing great so many times. 50% of households are 2 weeks away from insolvency, right? The cost of living has gone through the roof. With the carbon tax, you couldn't develop a better tax to make everything more expensive. We live in a large, cold country. It takes a lot of energy to do anything here, right? We're going to get rid of the carbon tax. We're going to unleash the private sector and get things back on track. And then we'll start to do things like infrastructure and your tax cuts. Right? These boutique tax cuts that everyone's offering up here, they're not going to solve anything. They're just buying your votes with your own money. Okay? We're not making promises that we can't meet. We're going to balance the books and get back to business.
Thank you. Sean, if you could just please tear up one card, please, one of your 3 cards. Okay, yep, just thank you. Richard Cannings from the NDP.
Okay, I just want to take this opportunity to dispel a myth I hear in the press, I hear on the doorstep. People say to me, I love the NDP, I love your policies, but you don't know how to manage money. And I just want to point out the facts, that this is completely opposite from the truth. And this is based on, of course, provincial governments, because we haven't had an NDP federal government in Canada, or we would have had pharmacare 50 years ago. And first of all, New Democrat governments have balanced their budget 40% of the time, compared with 33% for Conservatives and 23% for Liberals. 40, 33, 23. That's balancing budgets. Deficits under NDP governments have averaged 0.5% of GDP, compared with 1.1% for Conservative and 1.3% for Liberals. And lower spending. People think the NDP spend. We actually spend less than the Conservatives and Liberals. 21.6% of the economy versus 22 and 24. So an NDP government uses your money wisely. Thank you.
And using her first challenge card of the night is Connie Denisek.
Thank you. I'd just like to dispel another couple of myths that we just heard from the Conservative candidate. First of all, 75% of the debt in Canada has been accumulated under Conservative governments. And I just heard her reference. I also heard her reference that the massive debt of $27 billion for the Liberals this year, coming year, and she called it massive. So I wonder what she would call the $55 billion of debt in 1 year under Stephen Harper. And so the other thing that I also wanted to mention is when when the Conservatives did try to balance the budget, you'll remember they sold the family silver. They sold GM shares for pennies on the dollar. And what's really disturbing to me is they left $1 billion unspent money for veterans in Canada, and that was not acceptable. Thank you.
No other challenges on the floor, and a welcome to our Penticton City Council who came straight over from their meeting. So thank you for joining us, City Council. Our third member of the panel and his first question of the night, the news director from Penticton Castanet, and also a double winner tonight for Best Hair and Best Dressed Panelist, Colin Dacre.
According to Stats Canada, this is for the panel, by the way. According to Stats Canada, between 2014 and 2018, the crime rate in Penticton has climbed 42%. While violent crime rates have stayed low, property crime has become a major problem for this community. How should the federal government help address that?
As for the field, okay, so we'll start with Tara House from the Green Party.
Property crime, it's usually indicative of other issues. And so if we look at underlying reasons for that particular crime, usually things like petty B&Es or car break-ins, whatnot, it's a result of a poverty issue. And like I said, I've worked on these types of issues in the past when I lived in northern Manitoba. And we have to address things like addictions and why people are breaking into other people's houses to start with. And so we can look at alleviating initial costs and providing adequate mental health care, providing housing, providing the social work and the wraparound services that people provide. Petty crime is just that. It's not a fundamental... We can address these things through harm reduction techniques. And like I said, I have had effective solutions in Thompson addressing graffiti related to gang violence. And I feel in Penticton, all right, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Elena Conans.
I've been working on this file with the City Council for 7 years, and it has been very difficult. It does include problems, very varied problems, including homelessness, drug addiction, mental health, and they all need to be separated, and so that they can all be addressed as separate issues. But one of the things that we did when we were on City Council was make sure that there was housing built, and that will open in a few different places. There has been housing built in a few different places in Penticton to help with the homeless and those destitute. But the problem is that the mental health and the addiction services were not included with that housing. So that's where we're going to have to make sure, team up with the provincial government and help with those other services that need to come with housing, or else the crime rate is going to grow. There's no such thing as petty theft. Everybody here who has something crime related happen to them is scared, and it's not petty.
Sean Taylor, PPC.
So, governments are notoriously bad for dealing with problems that are multifactorial in causation. This is one of those things. I don't understand when we started letting our community, surrendering our communities to these populations, right? The amount, I'm a frontline emergency worker. I deal with this population every day. And the fact that Communities are choosing to forego law enforcement and just let them get away with this. It's not like we're spending money on the problem, right? And we're not the first ones to have these problems, right? I was talking with a gentleman just before on not harm reduction, but the Iceland problem. You know, the opioid addiction problem that's going on in this country right now. We've been doing opioids for thousands of years. Like, we're not the first country that's dealing with this. We need to look at previous countries and how they dealt with it and start being innovative with these things rather than just throwing more money at it, creating more government programs that are ineffective.
Thank you. Richard Cannings.
Well, thank you. And this is certainly something that I hear on the doorstep here in Penticton. I've been affected myself. I had 2 bikes stolen from a shed in the back of my yard on a 1-acre property on the West Bench. And it's something that I've seen growing over the past few years. And when I've talked to the legal profession here, I've talked to the RCMP, I've talked to local politicians, I've talked to the Attorney General of British Columbia, everybody points to the growing rate of addictions. Yes, opioids have been around for years, but the opioid addiction problem has been skyrocketing in North America, and particularly in British Columbia. It's not just Penticton, it's all across this riding. And when you have addicts, they need their drugs. Their drugs are illegal, and so they have to go out and commit these petty crimes, petty property theft. If we treated addiction as a medical issue, we could get these people into the services, the supports they need, and the crime rate would go down.
Connie Denisak.
Thank you for that question, and it's something that I've been hearing on the doorsteps as well as I knock on doors around Penticton and throughout the riding, actually. And so it's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and researching, and I really do believe that the crime that we're talking about is very much interconnected with some of the other issues that we see, social issues such as addictions. And I really do think that the solution is also multifaceted, and it's going to take time. Now, when I was with the BC School Trustees Association, I was known for bringing people together around a common vision. And I don't think this is going to be easy or fast, but I have the courage to care, bring people together. The community is even somewhat polarized around some of these issues. So bring the community together, find a common vision, and work together towards solutions. So that's what I'm committed to do. Thank you.
We have 2 challenges on the floor. Helena Conan said showed her card first, so she has 60 seconds to rebut what's been said on this topic.
We need to make sure that we separate problems having to do with mental health, having to do with addiction, and we have to make sure that those are addressed. But conservatives will be tough on crime. Everybody in this community are sick of the revolving door of criminals. There are some bad people out there, and we need to keep them behind bars. We need to separate those from the people that actually need help. And conservatives will help with that by being tougher on crime, making sure that those that are committing the serious crimes and multiple crimes, we are going to help those RCMP, help keep those people behind bars and keep us safe.
Richard Cannings is the second of 3 candidates to rebut.
Well, I want to say, for once here tonight at least, I almost totally agree with Helena that we have to separate the problems of homelessness, of mental health, of addiction and crime. They're interconnected in small ways. Homeless people are generally not drug addicts. They're people who are, facing other problems. The NDP will fight. We will decriminalize drugs, but we will not legalize them. We will still fight the gangs, the people that are selling those drugs and killing our people here in Penticton. If you go out and talk to drug addicts here, these are people who need our help. They are suffering. They are brothers, fathers, mothers, sisters. They want to be brought back to their families, and we have to help them do that.
Thank you. And using her first challenge card, tear it in half, please, Tara, is Tara Howes.
Violent crime and property crime are different, but fundamentally we can't be separating out mental health from and addictions from crime. We've tried being tough on crime and it does not work. We have to look at things from a holistic perspective and understand the reasons behind it. There are systemic issues in place that increase gender-based violence, that affect race-based violence, that affect sexual orientation-based violence. We're talking about less than 1% of the population that's actually what would be considered a true psychotic person that needs to be locked away. 99% of the population has a systemic issue against them that we need to address, and that has to be dealt through wraparound services, not through jail.
Thank you.
Just tear one of your cards in half, please.
All right, so that ends that question. We're going to go back to a new round. Somebody had asked me, a regular on our panels for the last 3 or 4 forums has been Chris Walker and from CBC Radio. Chris is on his honeymoon as we speak, and I thought he'd really rather come and spend 2 hours with me tonight, but doing a great job in his place, and we're so glad to have her on the panel tonight. Asking her second question of the night from CBC is Sarah Penton.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to some individual questions for our panelists. And my first question is going to be for Connie Denisick. This is your second federal election campaign running in this riding. In 2011, the Liberals got 6% of the votes. So you were able to pull 28%, I believe, in 2015. A very close third to the Conservative candidate. And you also had a photo of Justin Trudeau in your campaign car in 2015. This year, no picture of Justin Trudeau, just you on your car. Lovely picture, by the way. But you have said in the past that your decision has nothing to do with Justin Trudeau or his image. But I thought it would be a good time to ask, in light of the Trudeau brownface scandal, can you tell me how this impacts how you see Justin Trudeau as a leader? And just sorry, as a follow-up, as you continue through, and I'd like to know how this might, what concerns you might have in terms of Justin Trudeau's credibility on a world stage when it comes to these images being public now.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question. And I, as many Canadians, was very disappointed to see the pictures from 20 years ago, the brown face images that we all saw all over social media. I was not happy to see that, and I was disappointed to see those photos actually. But at the same time, I absolutely know by the Prime Minister's record that he is not a racist. He enjoys dressing up, as he said, and I'm glad he's apologized to Canadians for that. Now let's go to my car. It's really interesting how much attention the Conservatives have given to my car. And while they've been focusing on my car, I've been focusing on the people in the South Okanagan West Kootenay, which brings me back to the different picture. 4 years ago, I was not well known in the West Kootenays, and I'm well known in the West Kootenays now because I've spent a lot of time there, and I've worked hard, and I've door knocked, and I've met people there. And so 4 years ago, I connected myself with the leader at that time. There was also a problem between, I'm going to use one of my cards so I can continue to finish this. There was also a bit of a problem with the provincial Liberals versus the federal Liberals. People were saying, we don't really know the difference, particularly in the West Kootenays, we don't really know the difference between, or people aren't, we need to differentiate between the provincial Liberals and the federal Liberals. So that was another effort at that time. That's not the case now. We have a provincial NDP government, and I have a new picture. So I'm using the newer picture taken by Chris, who's in the audience here tonight. So I have the new picture on my car. I don't have the picture from 4 years ago because I might get criticized for using an old picture with less wrinkles. So anyway, I stand 100% behind my leader, and I respect what he's done, and I know he's not in any way racist. So I do appreciate the question, and I'm glad to continue my focus on the people of the South Okanagan West Kootenay. Thank you.
And using his second challenge card for a 60-second rebuttal is Sean Taylor.
So, I don't quite understand this outrage culture. Let's face facts. Yeah, if Clues were shoes on his best day, Trudeau's usually in his bare feet. The things that I find offensive is when our leader of our nation says that we have no core identity, right? Like the lack of accountability for what people are saying and what people are doing, and the things that we get outraged over. This was years ago, he was a young guy, who cares, right? Like that doesn't affect us as a nation, right? Why aren't we being outraged about the things that do, right? A complete abandonment of our sovereignty and saying that we don't have a core identity, right? Like that's the things that we should be concerned about, not this superficial petty stuff. Anyways.
Thank you. Candidates, we are at 3 minutes to 8, and Tara, you have 2 challenge cards left. The rest of you have 1, and we'll go to a brand new question from Joe Fries.
Staying with the individual questions and with Mr. Taylor, this is from the People's Party's platform. Quote, "Our immigration policy can benefit Canadians only if we welcome the right kind of immigrants." End quote. Who is the right kind of immigrant?
So, we're a country that relies on immigrants to make the economic wheels turn here. I work in northern Alberta, right? It's a fact. We need immigrants, and we need immigrants that are going to help Canada. Okay, focusing on economic immigration to make our economy stronger and to make us stronger. Signing UN mandates that can, even though the government says, well, they're not binding, but we sign them anyways, right? Telling us who comes to our country and when is not on, right? We need to start asking immigrants when they come here, what can you do for our country, right? They believe we have a core identity. They want to come here. Friends of mine, one of my best friends, I went to his citizenship ceremony. He's from Colombia, and it was one of the proudest days of my life watching all these people. They thought they had just won the lottery, right? We've got a magnificent nation, and people want to come here because they like it, right? What can they do for us to make us stronger?
Thank you. Sean, Joe has a follow-up for you.
It's not a follow-up. It's I'm just going to ask 2 in a row.
I'm sorry, Joe?
It's not a follow-up. I'm going to ask 2 in a row.
Okay.
So the next question is for Ms. House. And it's an individual question. And I'm going to preface my question by reading a portion of your biography that's on the Green Party website. Quote, "Tara Howes has a career background in community economic development, a field that has given her experience on a broad range of social justice issues. A social scientist, she is a strong proponent of mixed methodology approaches when researching an issue, as she believes you have to see multiple sides of a problem to find the best solution. With an undergrad degree in criminal justice, she is currently completing a Master's of Integrated Studies in Global Change and Equity Issues, looking at the concepts of trust, post-colonial theory, and intersectionality." End quote. Now, in plain language, how do you make a living?
I don't think everyone heard that. What's my job? Yeah, I'm a home-based consultant. I do social science research on a contract basis. I'm a small business owner. In the West Kootenays, we have Selkirk College, so I do work with them in their Rural Development Institute, looking at rural economic development initiatives. For instance, I'm working on a project for a feasibility study on a cooperative home insurance business model. I've worked with the Columbia Basin Trust on things like the Columbia River Treaty. I've worked with the Skills Center on women's economic security projects, and that project had a number of spin-offs, including working with mining giant Teck. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Colin Dacre.
This is an individual question for Ms. Conans. The Conservatives have argued that regulation, not taxes, are the solution to climate change. At the same time, Andrew Scheer has criticized Liberal regulations like clean fuel standards. He was also the only Liberal or the only leader to not participate in last week's climate protests. Why should environmentally conscious voters support the Conservative Party?
Conservatives do not believe that a carbon tax is going to solve the problem for the environment. All it does is make life more expensive for all of us. In particular, it is an attack on rural Canada because we don't have a SkyTrain that goes from here to Castlegar or here to the Kelowna Hospital. We try to increase our bus service as much as possible, but we are basically a small city, so we have to drive. How many people drove here tonight? How many people drove here in their electric cars? Well, it's because it's difficult, it's expensive. So what we believe in is technology, not taxes. So we will promote technology, and first of all, we'll make sure that the large emitters are the ones that pay the large emitters invest in green technology. And we have lots of instances of local companies that are doing that here right now. One local company in particular is doing quite a bit. I'll explain that in another, and when I'll come up to the microphone and do it again. I don't want to use my last card. So, thank you.
All right. Sarah Penton.
We're going to wrap up our individual questions for now with Richard Cannings. I would like to ask you about LNG in BC, specifically the $40 billion project in Kitimat. Your leader, Jagmeet Singh, initially supported it, but backed down in May and has been unclear. He won't say if he actually supports it. As you, as a politician, as an MP, how do you feel about liquefied natural gas in BC?
Well, Jagmeet Singh has always said there's no future for LNG or any other fossil fuel. And, you know, this is a project that is going ahead. Even the federal Greens have said we can't stop it. What the NDP feels is that we have to look to the future and make sure that this kind of project won't be given subsidies in the future. This project is only going ahead because it's heavily subsidized by the government. We will stop those subsidies. And, you know, quite frankly, I don't know what the economic future for LNG is. Last year I was down in Argentina at the G20 energy meetings. Jim Carr, the Canadian minister, these were meetings about the grand transition to a zero carbon future. Jim Carr got up and said, we want to export LNG and get credit for that. We're getting China off coal. Next in alphabetical order was the Chinese minister who said, there is no such thing as a clean fossil fuel and we are going directly from coal to renewables.
Thank you. Joe Fries with a new question.
Thank you. We'll go back to the panel questions now. Here's my question. It's time to take the gloves off. I'd like to give each of you, the question to each of you is, what is one major hole in one of your opponent's platforms that people should know about?
What is one major hole in your opponent?
Pick one of your opponents and tell us a major platform in his or, pardon me, pick one of your opponents and tell us a major hole in his or her platform.
Okay, and so Helena Conans is first.
Well, I'm going to choose the NDP candidate and their platform. The candidate is promising a lot, but unfortunately, they're a third party right now and sinking in the polls. So as a third party candidate, if a vote for this candidate is a vote basically for Justin Trudeau, because Justin Trudeau is going to get back in if we vote for Dick Cannings. He doesn't have a lot of power. You've heard him mention over and over again that he's frustrated not being able to get bills through, not being able to get things done. Ministers aren't listening to him. it's an issue that we need to have somebody who has some power representing this riding. When the Conservatives were in power, we got things like the pool, the twinning of the highways, infrastructure investment in this riding. We haven't had anything, barely anything, for 4 years.
Thank you. Sean Taylor, People's Party.
This is a target-rich environment. Environmental. I say this is my number 3 reason for being, my main 3 reasons for enjoying the PPC platform. And people look at me like, well, you guys are the climate change deniers, right? Renewables don't work, okay? There's 2 things that are going to take us off fossil fuels, and saying they have no future is completely ridiculous. The future looks like we're looking at peak global demand in about 20 to 25 years. So taking us out of the marketplace and not being able to capture that to pay for all these things that you're offering everyone, I don't know how you're going to do it. But 4th-gen nuclear and thermonuclear. That's what's going to get us there, right? If you want something done, get the Germans to do it. They tried. They jumped in with both feet on solar. Their emissions have gone through the roof. They don't like talking about it. The biggest thing that's reduced carbon emissions is fracking. Switching from coal to natural gas has done more for the environment than anything else in the last 2 decades, right? Like, it's time to start using our heads and go with what the data shows.
Thank you. Richard Cannings.
Okay, well, I was trying to decide which to do, but Helena made up my mind. I'm first going to rebut a bit of what she said, that being a member of the third party means that this riding doesn't get any infrastructure funding. I assume that's what she said. And if that's how you measure effectiveness, and if she's claiming that a Conservative Party wouldn't spend any money in an NDP riding, or a Liberal Party wouldn't spend any money in an NDP riding, I think we need a new way of doing politics in this country. And the fact is that I've actually been very effective in getting infrastructure funding into this riding. And we've brought in $20 million into Grand Forks to help them there, $4 million for expanding the trail airport. I could go on. I would just, to poke at a hole in their platform, I would say saying the carbon tax is making everything more expensive. You know, this is the quickest and cheapest way to reduce fossil fuel or greenhouse gas emissions. We should embrace it and pay it gladly. Thank you.
Liberal candidate Connie Denisak.
Thank you. And before I point out a concern that I have with the platform, I just want to mention that Richard Cannings mentioned that he brought in a lot of money into the riding, and that infrastructure money would not have occurred under a Conservative government. Just want to make that very, very clear. So the hole that I'm most concerned about is in the Conservative platform, and it's really around some very important social issues that deal with equality, and that is women's equality, the right to choose, and it's also LGBTQ rights. Now, we have a leader, or the Conservatives have a leader that refuses to march in Pride, refuses to apologize for comments that he made years ago around unfortunate comments. I'm not going to repeat them. And he refuses to acknowledge that that this is not the Canada that we want. This is not the Canada that Canadians want. A country of diversity and equality where we all respect one another. So that's a hole that I would like to point out. Thank you.
And speaking last on this question is the Green candidate, Tara Howes.
This is not my style to pick on people. And Connie really just stole my whole thing. I have that all. Women's rights, LGBTQ, and climate addressing leadership. And I think, we can all have our own personal issues, but we are all up here because we are to represent you. And so we need to be strong and bold enough to sometimes put those personal things aside. We can say those things in private, but in the public, we have to take a stance for the betterment of society. And that does include attending pride marches, attending climate marches, and staying strong to women's right to choose and access to safe medical care.
You're going to use okay. Helena Conant is going to use her final challenge.
The reason why my opponents bring up issues like LGBTQ, equal rights, and feminine issues, the right to choose, is because they want to divert the attention away from issues having to do with their excess spending, their ethics, in particular the Liberals, their ethics, Justin Trudeau's ethics. I'm completely supportive of LGBTQ. I marched in the Kelowna Parade. By the way, I didn't see anybody at the Kelowna Parade except for myself from this sitting here. I also I have family members that are in same-sex marriages. I believe in the right to choose, and I will fight for that for my daughter to always have the right to choose. And I would never follow a leader that would not allow that to happen. We are not going to debate that issue further, and he has mentioned that over and over again, but you will hear our opponents bring that up again and again to divert from the real issues that we have to face in this country right now.
Thank you. Tara Howes will use her next challenge card.
To pretend that LGBTQ, gender, race are not issues, that yeah, that's a rough one, Helena. And again, this wasn't about you personally, Helena. This is about your leader. This is about a party that is representing a vast majority, a party that's supposed to be representing people. And we are all people, and everything is impacted. And when we look at the systemic issues that exist, that's exactly the types of things that our politicians are supposed to be standing up for. Yeah.
Thank you. Just an update. We're coming up on 8:15. Helena has used her 3 challenges. Everyone else is strategically holding on to one more challenge card. Interesting question, Joe. I have no idea what the questions are going to be tonight. That was a good one. Colin Dacre is up with his next question.
This is another question for the panel. The lack of affordable housing has been named by businesses as the largest inhibitor of economic growth in Penticton and many other communities in the region. Winery workers are being housed in oil patch-style trailers in Oswego. How would your federal government address the housing crunch?
Sean Taylor, you are first.
I need a second to think about that. Again, federal government intervention on these things, local issues. Every region has its own demand for housing, and it's across the board. It seems lately like I'm just going to go back. Free market, right? By unleashing the free market on this, getting rid of a lot of the regulations that are inhibiting this stuff to happen, right? Rent control, we've known for since the 50s that doesn't work. There's a lot of things that we can do to free up, and reducing the cost of building, right? The carbon tax, it's a huge tax on everything. This is by reducing I'm stumbling. I'm just going to shut up.
Thank you. Richard Cannings.
Well, thank you. And I would first say that this is not just a local issue. This is probably one of the main issues of this election across the country. It's certainly an issue here in this riding, especially in the Okanagan. I can list so many ways that this issue is affecting not only individual people and their lives, but the economy. There's a I talked to a fellow who has a company in Oliver. He wanted to hire 2 high-tech people to come and get his company really growing. He could only bring in 1 because he had to spend the other money to buy a house for that first person and rent it to him because there was no place for that person in Oliver. Another very ironic one, a group of organizations in Penticton got together, got some money to hire someone to work on the affordable housing problem in Penticton. They couldn't find housing and left. So this is something that we have to face. The federal government got out of the affordable housing game 30 years ago, the Liberals and the Conservatives. We're 100,000 units behind, and the NDP will make up that difference.
Thank you. Connie Denisak.
Thank you, Colin, for that question. And I think it's one that I hear on the doorstep over and over again, not only here in Penticton, but throughout the riding. And I am very pleased that the federal government is beginning to implement the first ever national housing strategy. And that comes with an unprecedented $40 billion attached to it. Now, recognizing that not everything happens overnight, it takes some time to do these things, the retrofits in existing buildings. So what we're doing now is working with communities. What the Liberal government is doing is working with communities, working with BC Housing specifically, and involved in some of the projects right here in Penticton. But it's going to take some time to catch up with the need, and it's something that we need to be diligent in doing, and something that $40 billion is going to make a difference right here in the South Okanagan West Kootenay. Thank you.
Kara Howes.
Echoing Dick and Connie here, yes, housing is more than just a local issue, and there are measures that we can take at the federal level. The fact that we have a housing strategy, I mean, that is fantastic. There are definite shortcomings, but it is a wonderful step that we have, and we would like to continue to build on that work. I mean, in Rosslyn, we deal with the housing shortage with our local ski hill workers all the time, and there are measures that we can take to increase the market rental. We've got a deemed GST right now on condo units when they sit empty. For the developers in the audience, we can remove that deemed GST and encourage you to place that empty condo unit and provide a rental unit. We can adjust the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation's mandate to address core housing needs. It used to be their mandate back in the 70s and has shifted. And we can also address cooperative and intergenerational houses, again through CMHC, encouraging them to provide the financing and making it easier to finance that, and including working with our Indigenous communities to ensure that they have adequate housing and access to financing.
Thank you. Elena Conans.
Yes, I did my master's thesis on housing, actually, and got my master's in June from UBC Okanagan. Worked with my city council for 7 years on housing in Penticton and in the South Okanagan with RDOS. We worked on housing quite a bit. It obviously is an issue. What the Conservative Party wants to do, will look at the mortgage stress test that the Liberals have put in place, and we need to change that because that is causing a difficulty for first-time homeowners to buy property. We also are going to extend the amortization period for housing, which will make for mortgages, which will make for lower mortgage payments. We will, in general, not treat Vancouver the same as a city like Penticton or a city like or a town like Rosslyn, which is completely different. We need to look at every city in a unique fashion because every single community has its own housing issues.
Thank you. And we have a challenge card on the floor, so using his third and final challenge card is Richard Cannings.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Connie's claim that nothing happens overnight. The Liberals have been in power for 4 years. The NDP were telling them from the start that affordable housing is the #1 issue in the country. They went along and had studies and, finally came out last year with a plan. They have ended up spending in 4 years less than the Harper government spent on housing in the previous government. So we need action now. As I said, the NDP will build 100,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years and starting right away. And I just want to also give a shout out to Penticton, because this city has a remarkable group of organizations and people working to build housing for people who can't afford it. So I just wanted to thank the people from 100 Homes and groups like that.
Thank you. For those who are watching at home on Castanet, this is the Penticton Herald's All Candidates Forum at the Penticton Lakeside Resort. Sound is provided tonight by SW and our great sound man, Ben, courtesy of the South Okanagan Real Estate Board. Thank you to them for their participation. Going back to the media table for a new question is from CBC Radio, Sarah Penton.
Thanks very much. I'd like to ask about gun control next. The federal parties have very different policies on gun control. Liberals have proposed a ban on semi-automatic assault rifles. They want to give cities more power to ban handguns. But just today, some big city mayors in Ontario said that does not go far enough, that they would like to see the proposal to have handguns banned across Canada. I would like to know individually, each one of you, what your own views are on where gun control should or could go in this country, if at all.
All right, panelists, now we are going to go backwards for the remainder of the meeting, so to your right, so that you speak before or after someone different. So Sean Taylor, gun control, you're up.
Gun laws affect law-abiding citizens, okay? Under the People's Party of Canada, we would repeal C-71 and C-68, draft up new gun legislation that promotes responsible gun ownership and putting the focus on gun crime rather than law-abiding citizens who happen to shoot recreationally, right? We think it's piling more laws on. I used to be a recreational shooter. I used to, in the military, I was on a combat pistol shooting team. I shot a lot. It became such a hassle, I stopped doing it, right? If you ban guns, you're going to make a lot of good people criminals, right? People committing gun crime don't go down to the local RCMP, get a permit to convey to the 7-Eleven and back to their home. It just doesn't happen, right? These piling laws on law-abiding citizens is not the answer. It's enforcing the laws that we have and going after gun crime.
Thank you. Helena Conans.
We definitely do not want to treat law-abiding citizens like criminals. So a blanket law on firearms, and one that treats Toronto the same as Penticton, will not work. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we have strong background checks, stronger background checks. But we also need to make sure that guns are not getting across the border, because that is where the guns are coming across, at border crossings. So we need to make sure that they're not crossing the border anymore. We need to stop straw sales of firearms, which means the resale of firearms. But again, we need to make sure that law-abiding citizens are not treated like criminals.
Thank you. Tara Howes.
Guess what, folks? I don't hate guns. We need to keep them out of our big cities. But, you know, a rural need, whether we're hunting or farming or sport shooting even, I actually don't personally see anything wrong with that. We do need to address gun smuggling at the border. This is also an opportunity for me to extend an example of a platform issue that I actually don't agree with in the Green platform, and that's their launching a confidential buyback program for handguns and assault weapons. Who all remembers the long gun registry program? That was a fiasco and it didn't work. And so I would actually vote against a buyback program. It seems really costly and ineffective. You know, we could, maybe develop an amnesty program where people can, confidentially return their guns, but I don't think the government needs to be spending money buying that back. But again, I don't actually have a fundamental issue with guns as long as they're residing within law-abiding citizens' houses and they've gone through the proper paperwork.
Thank you. Tanya Denisak.
Yes, thank you for that question. And I've had a lot of conversations with people in my family, people that I know, around gun legislation and how we can keep Canadians safer, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day, is it's keeping Canadians safer. And unfortunately, some of the gun deaths that have been increasing here in Canada, and so that prompts the need for action. And I'm proud of Bill C-71 that helped to mitigate some of the issues and concerns that we have as far as banning in our platform, banning the assault-style weapons. I am fully in favor of that because I don't know anyone who hunts with that kind of a firearm. And as far as giving cities the opportunity to make the decisions around the handguns, I support that. Because I know that there's a lot of gun violence that takes place in many of the big cities. And I certainly don't want to go to the sheer style that he promised when he was running for the leadership, that he would allow gun lobby groups to help classify different firearms. And I think that's, rather than the RCMP. So I want to make sure that we keep Canadians safe, and that's why I support the legislation and the platform. Thank you.
Richard Cannings.
Well, the NDP has also agreed that we should allow municipalities, and this really means the larger municipalities like Toronto and Vancouver, the ability to regulate firearms within their own boundaries, especially handguns. We think that's a good way to go because that is where most of the problem is. Bill C-71 is an entirely reasonable piece of legislation that, Helena talked about increased background checks, the sales, keeping records of sales. That's what Bill C-71 does, and yet the Conservatives fought it tooth and nail all the way through the House of Commons. So we need common sense with guns. We do not want to go where the United States has gone. That would be madness. We need to provide more funding, I agree, to CBSA for checks at the border. I was doing a tour of the Osoyoos border crossing one day when they actually had just found some guns smuggled in a car the previous night. And they told me how difficult it was, how time-consuming it is to actually detect that. So we need to help them catch those guns at the border.
Thank you. Candidates, it is 8:30. We'll get as many questions in as we can in the next 25 minutes, and we're going to go back to Sarah Penton.
We're going to go to another individual question. Richard Cannings, I have a question for you. As the Liberal MP for this riding, we had, some of the other panelists had touched on this earlier, and you did in your opening remarks about being a member of the third party in the House of Commons. Can you tell us what specifically you have done as a member of the NDP for the Penticton area specifically, and what confidence people could have in you as their MP again if the NDP does not manage to get power in the 2019 election, if it is still in a third-party position? What confidence can people have that you'll do things for this riding?
Well, what I would say is, being a member of the third party isn't as bad as it seems. It's not like you're a nobody. You actually get to do a lot more interesting things. You have a lot more responsibility as a member of the third party than you would if you were a Liberal backbencher, for instance. I meet Liberal backbenchers all the time who are bored silly because they don't get a chance to stand up in the House of Commons and speak. They never get a chance to criticize the government, obviously. And yet I can do that all the time, and that's where I stand up for this riding. I can ask questions in question period, and I've asked them about every community in this riding, I think. And yet, if you're a Liberal member, you get one chance a year, probably, if that, to ask a question in question period. And it's a softball to a minister, can the minister tell me what wonderful things they're doing? So, as a member of the third party, it's actually, you have quite a lot of responsibility and power to do things for your riding, and I'm proud of what I've done. And
can you give us an example of something you have done for this area?
Well, as I say, what we do for this area is I advocate, when people are putting in applications for federal funding, I will write letters of support, I'll talk to the minister, I'll hand a letter to the minister, sit down and talk to them. I have that access every day. Ministers come to question period, I can go up to them in the 15 minutes beforehand and say, this group is looking for important funding for this project, please consider it. so that's an important thing when they see that I think it's important, that they will more likely.
Not to press, but I'm looking for, are there any specific examples?
I'm just struggling to figure, I signed so many of these letters of support and hand in so many letters. I'm trying to think of one in Penticton. I don't know if there's somebody in the crowd that can help me. But, well, I could talk about my private member's bill with, which would help, was inspired by Structurelam, a local company, and that legislation was specifically designed to help manufactured wood. And anyways, that is one example where they were very happy to get my support.
Thank you. Joe Fries.
Okay, back to another individual question, and this is for Ms. House from the Green Party. Some people dismiss the Green Party platform as unrealistic. For example, the platform envisions $65 billion in new revenue over the next 5 years. $31 billion of that would come from quote-unquote tax havens. If it was that easy to recoup $31 billion, someone probably would have done it already. So how is that a realistic platform plank?
They haven't done it because the corporations are saying don't do it, and they are lobbying government to prevent that from happening. I think that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another individual question. This one's for Mr. Taylor. With all due respect, sir, I hate to break it to you, but it's unlikely you're going to be elected as MP. So given that, why should people consider you and voting for you?
I think you might be surprised. We're the fastest growing political party in Canadian history. People are mad. People are mad. Look what's going on, man. It's just, everything has shifted so far to the left. I don't know, like, this is a little out of my wheelhouse. I spent half my career learning how to make holes in people, half my career learning how to plug holes in people. I'm so sick of my own voice right now. Like, I look up on stage here, I'm in a political debate with conservatives that aren't conservatives, liberals that aren't liberals, Greens that have a bad environmental policy. The only one that's really on point is the NDP. They're as ridiculous as ever. People are mad. People are mad. Every time I turn on the CBC, right, I'm told how I'm oppressing women and minorities and living on my white privilege, and I'm busy serving my communities. I've always served my communities, and I've served my country, right? I fight for my patients. I fight for the troops in my command, and if you elect me, I'll fight for you.
Thank you. And we're back to Colin Dacre.
This is a question for Ms. Denizik. In 2015, the Liberals campaigned on major infrastructure spending, yet down in Oliver, the town has been trying for years to get the federal government to help repair its irrigation canal there, something the Trudeau government has pretty much refused. Why should this riding's voters support a government that has refused to pay for something as basic as water for farmers?
I'm going to agree with you. I think that is one of the infrastructure projects that should be funded. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be knocking on the minister's door every day until that infrastructure project is completed. We know that there are 600 farmers that rely on that water for irrigation. And why it didn't fit certain criteria for certain projects. But I think this is where a very strong member of parliament comes in, and that's where my strength, my advocacy, my boldness would sort of bring me to the point where I'm knocking on the door of the ministers on a daily basis, because I really do think that that infrastructure money should have been spent, and that long-term solution for the siphon project should occur.
All right. Using her final challenge card of the night is Green candidate Tara Howes.
Through the development of a Council of Canadian Government, the Green Party actually really wants to support municipalities and work with them. We are committed to, it's currently called the gas tax. It's actually now should be renamed to a municipal fund. We'd like to double that money. Also provide 1% of the GST straight to municipalities to allow them a steady funding stream to address our aging infrastructure, which we see across the country. We've got, our infrastructure is decades, if not centuries old. And then, of course, there's the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, which we can lobby to reduce their interest rates to address infrastructure needs. Thanks.
Thanks, Tara. And we're back to Colin Dacre.
This is another question, individual for Ms. Conans. Beyond making maternity benefits tax-free, the Conservatives have not promised to increase funding or create new childcare spaces, unlike the other two major parties' platforms. Should the federal government not play a larger role in creating more childcare spaces to address shortages like we have here in Penticton?
I think that the federal government can encourage that. That's true, and we need it. I have been working on this issue with the other city councillors, as they know they're out there. They've been working on this too. We have a lack of daycare spaces in Penticton and in the South Okanagan, which is really hampering business. But the thing is that one of the problems is that people want daycare, but they don't want daycare in their neighborhood. So we would get groups of people coming out fighting to have against large daycares in their neighborhood. And so we have a lack of space in Penticton. What we need to do is the federal government, the provincial governments need to encourage municipalities to zone properly for daycare so that neighborhoods aren't surprised when a daycare opens up. Otherwise, there's so many social and issues having to do with daycare, including hampering the ability for both parents to work.
Thank you. And we have a challenge card. So using her final challenge card of the evening is Connie Denisek.
And I want you to all notice that this was an ace up my sleeve. And I chose to use it to talk about children, kids, because that's basically what I've spent my life working towards as a school trustee for many years. And actually, while I was the chair of the Okanagan College Board of Governors, I was a champion for the daycare center that we have, the Passive House here in Penticton on the Okanagan College property. So I just wanted to mention again, as Joe alluded to, is the fact that we have 250,000 daycare spaces that we've committed to, the Liberal government is committed to, if we're returned to power and receive our second mandate. And those spaces are going to allow for parents that are working shifts, because we know not everyone works from 8 in the morning until 5 at night. So this is going to open up opportunities for parents to use daycare and get a strong start for their children, be well cared for in quality daycare spaces to help build the next generation and support those families. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more round of questions through the panel, so we'll go back to the extreme left, and Sarah Penton is going to ask the next question.
Switching orders.
Colin Audible here.
Okay. Well, Colin's going to answer? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Colin Dacre.
By age, this is one of the oldest ridings. This is for the panel. By age, this is one of the oldest ridings in the country, with nearly 30% of residents over age 65. That's a number that's expected to grow in the coming years. How would your federal government make the lives of Penticton seniors better?
So the question is seniors. We're going the other way, so Helena Conans will answer first.
The Conservatives will make life less expensive overall. We're working on we will cut the carbon tax federally. Of course, there'll still be a provincial carbon tax. We'll have to urge the province to cut back on. That will bring down the costs. We're giving a $1,000 age credit that will actually equal about $350 a year for a couple to save a year, a senior couple to save every year. We will have an $850 universal tax cut that will really help pensioners in particular. That's the average $850 that they will save a year. And we will put more money in your pocket by making life less expensive. It's been getting more expensive for the last 4 years, and we plan to turn that around October 21st.
Kara Howes.
Well, to start, let's get a national senior strategy going. Through a strategy, we can actually start understanding needs a little bit better and create a holistic, cohesive, project and plan. But again, we can look at things like housing and supporting cooperative and intergenerational housing that I spoke about earlier. We can create innovative solutions to allow people to actually stay in their homes longer. We can develop a dementia strategy. I understand that is a big platform in the Green Party, is to working towards a dementia strategy, and also investing in long-term care beds. When we look at affordability, again, we can look at things like pharmacare and guaranteed livable income. These things can be funded through the elimination of other projects or other funding streams. But ultimately, again, I think we need to start with a national strategy and really understand what are the needs, and working with the provinces, the Indigenous or territories, and the municipalities to make sure those projects aren't just federally based, but locally based.
Connie Denisuk will answer next.
Yeah, thank you for that good question. We have the second highest median age in all of the 338 ridings in Canada. We also have the third highest number of seniors in all of the 338 ridings in Canada. So I was very excited to learn that there's some significant initiatives underway for seniors, that it will affect people right here in the South Okanagan West Kootenay, right here in Penticton. So one of those is when people hit the golden age of 75 years, their old age security will go up by 10%. Another one of the initiatives that's promised in our platform is that when a partner loses their spouse, the surviving benefit will be increased by 25%. So I think seniors who have worked hard their whole lives, helped to build this country, need to retire in dignity, and I'm very proud of the plan moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Richard Cannings.
Well, I'd like to talk about pensions here. When I go around knocking on doors, talking to people, I meet a lot of senior citizens who are living on OIS, and I don't think 10% is going to make a huge difference to them. They are struggling because they worked their whole lives. A lot of them paid into company pensions, and then their companies declared bankruptcy, and they lost that money to the banks. These are pensions that they're deferred wages. Their unions and groups fought for those pensions. They put aside that money because that was going to be their future when they're seniors. And yet, when the companies go bankrupt, that money goes to the banks and they lose it. I met one man who had done that twice in a row. He'd worked for a company in the Kootenays. He'd gone to Prince Rupert. He lost 2 pensions and now is working at age 83 because he can't afford to live otherwise. The NDP put forward private members' bill to fix that problem. The Liberals and Conservatives voted against it.
Thank you. Sean Taylor, People's Party.
Yeah, we're not going to do anything for seniors. I know that might sound a little funny given the hair that I'm looking at right now in this room. Okay? Our plan's good for all Canadians. All right? Our fair, well-distributed tax plan is good for everyone. Right? We lower the cost of living by reducing the carbon tax. Right? We're getting rid of capital gains. So for those of you who have had retirement investments and you go to sell them, that's a pretty big deal. Okay? Everyone's up here to pander to you. Buy your votes with your own money. Okay? We're not doing that. We're not working for any specific group. We're working for all of Canada. Right? We got the baby boomers who are transitioning out of homes right now, the largest segment of the population. Is that a coincidence that the Liberals have planned to introduce or reintroduce capital gains on your own home, your personal home? That's a huge, huge source of money, right? So, yeah, with a Conservative government that's just going to change the carbon tax, shuffle stuff around, yeah, we're going with simple and we're going with fair for everyone. We don't care if you're young, you're old.
Thank you. We'll go back to the media table for a new question with Sarah Penton.
All right, another question for the panel, and we did talk about this a little bit earlier on, but I'd like to expand further upon what your party would do to address the opioid crisis. In BC alone, thousands of people have died. It was declared a public health emergency in 2016. I would like to know how your party would address the opioid crisis, and please, in your answer, could you also address safe supply? When we've seen so many public health professionals, Bonnie Henry, BC's own provincial health officer, has said that the only way to solve this is a low barrier access to a regulated supply of opioids. So how would your party address the opioid crisis? And in your answer, please tell me what your party would do, or would it address a safe supply or endorse a safe supply of opioids for addicts?
Okay, we'll begin with Tara Howes from the Green Party.
It is a national health crisis. The opioid addictions, they have actually reduced our average lifespan in Canada already. Again, it's a mental health issue. We need to decriminalize possession, provide safe supply, and provide the services to people to safe injections. For those familiar with the Downtown East Side, the Insight project, it's been a phenomenally recognized and internationally studied harm reduction site for safe injection. They've had 0 deaths at their sites for the opioid crisis. The other thing we have to remember is that most of these deaths are related to poisoning, so they're unsafe drugs that are being used. And by providing the safe supply in a safe, secure area with services around, we can save lives. We need to stop, this war on drugs and start fighting for lives. Thanks.
Thank you. Connie Denisek is next.
Thank you very much. I would guess that no one here in this room hasn't been touched in some way by a friend or family or child of a friend that hasn't been touched by the opioid crisis. As a matter of fact, there have been 4,400 deaths this past year, and it is a crisis. It's something that needs immediate action, and it's something that we've been working on, the Liberals have been working on, again, with a 4-pillar approach that includes harm reduction. And there are other issues that are involved with the opioid crisis. Much of it is mental health related in many cases, self-medication. So there's another upstream methods of helping these people that are struggling with opioids, and that's really around counseling supports, and there's also the gap between addiction and recovery, and we need to fill those gaps, and there's commitment in the budget and in our platform to make sure we fill those gaps. Thank you.
And would your party endorse safe supply, yes or no?
That's something that I've read, that our party is not going to guarantee legalization, certainly, but that's something that I think we need to talk more about. It's something that I've been speaking with people all throughout the riding, and I hope to influence those conversations when we have them in Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Cannings.
Yes, the NDP would endorse safe supply. It's one of our core platform items around the opioid crisis. As was said, we all have someone who's been touched by this. I have 2 friends who have lost their sons to the opioid crisis. We have been calling on the government to declare it an emergency to free up funds. That hasn't happened. But we have to provide a safe supply. There was a wonderful pilot project in Vancouver. I think 90 addicts were given a safe supply because, first of all, they had a safe supply. They didn't die from fentanyl. They were able to get their lives back because they didn't have to go around and committing property crime to get their drugs. And other countries have copied this, but Canada seems reluctant to go down that road. I don't know why. This is the obvious solution to not only why we are letting our young people die with bad drugs, but also this whole criminal activity that we're so against. We must provide a safe supply, and we must help these people.
Thank you. Sean Taylor.
So, we don't currently have a policy on this. Being a non-whip party, I can endorse a plan that's supported in this local riding. As a frontline healthcare worker, it's such a complex problem, right? And like I said before, governments are really bad at doing these things. We can look to other nations who followed this, right? Let's face facts, prohibition does not work. Decriminalizing it, I'd say it's half measures, right? You're still putting the money into the hands of organized crime. Safe supply, I'm a fiscal conservative. It would be cheaper to do, right? And bottom line, that's what it comes down to me. What's the best outcome? How can we do this? The most, in the Army we call it economy of effort. What's the easiest way to do it? We're not the first ones with this problem, right? We need to look around the world, conduct studies, and use the data to lead us through, right? But we're going to have to shift our ideas about the morality of what's right, what's wrong, and how we deal with these things.
Thank you, Sean Taylor. Helena Conans.
We need to approach this in a fair and compassionate way towards these people that have this problem and this health problem in Canada. But as a local official, I can tell you that there needs to be a community conversation about this. The last thing I would want to see is safe sites here without the community having some input, including City Council and the community, the people who live here, on where those sites would be. As for the Conservative Party, I believe the discussion is still out right now on safe injection sites, but the most important thing is that if these do occur, that there are wraparound services. You cannot offer drugs or substitute drugs to people with these addictions without having mental health services and services to get these people off drugs, because most of them, conservatively, most of them want to get off of drugs if offered the opportunity.
Thank you. We're going to go to a snapper question to end the evening. 30-second response, no panelists. You only get 30 seconds for this one. Connie, you'll be up first, and we'll go to Joe Fries.
Thank you. It's an important question, and so we wanted to get it in, but we'll give you the bell at 20 seconds, and you're done at 30. None of you in your campaign literature identified as being of Indigenous descent, so I'm going to assume you don't identify that way. So tell us, give us one way in which you've personally undertaken to reconcile with our Indigenous neighbours.
I have a few. While I was the chair of the school board right here in Penticton, our Indigenous graduation rates, it was an issue that was important to me. Our Indigenous graduation rates more than doubled because that's something that I wanted to do. When I was chair of Okanagan College Board of Governors, again, Indigenization was something that was very important to me. And what I did, because it was our first strategic goal, was Indigenization, I ensured that the next chair and the vice chair were actually Indigenous so that they could lead the initiative that was so important to me. And so there's a lot more, but I'm out of time.
Thank you. Richard Cannings.
Well, in my previous life as a biologist, I worked a lot with local First Nations. I worked in programs that brought together school kids from both sides of the river, as we say here in Penticton, and brought them together to do habitat reconstruction and listen to elders. And I've also tried to learn a few words of the Seal language in Sealshan, because language is at the heart of culture, it's at the heart of reconciliation. So, lim limt.
Thank you. Sean Taylor, 30 seconds.
30 seconds, all right. I've been thinking about this stuff since I was a young man working as an EMT in Indigenous communities in northern Alberta. And the problems we face, I'm happy to say we were asked a question earlier, and I said, my answer was, I don't believe the open-mindedness or the political courage to address this problem exists in the political landscape today, including my own party. 2 days later, Max rolled out what I think is the best move forward in coming to an agreement and an understanding and bringing the Indigenous population into the fold.
Thank you. Helena Conans.
In working as a city councillor to help with the economic development of the Penticton Indian Band 6 years ago, I flew with the band members and representatives from the band to speak with ministers in Victoria to advocate for the bridge that now goes across the channel to the Mazda dealership and will soon be an economic hub for the Penticton Indian Band. And I believe that the City Council has worked hard to help promote and to help the Penticton Indian Band further their economic development.
Thank you. Tara Howes.
I lived in Thompson, Manitoba, where I had the opportunity to learn quite a bit and work with a lot of the Cree organizations there. I fully endorse UNDRIP, the Truth and Reconciliation Actions, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Reports. I was actually the only person up here this evening to acknowledge the Silks Nation and their territory. Post-colonial theory with my master's is exactly that. It is understanding how colonization has impacted our Indigenous people and continues to impact them.
Thank you. Before we go to our closing statements of 60 seconds each, a couple house cleaning items. Again, this is the Penticton Herald's All Candidates Forum. I know some of the audience members were perhaps disappointed that we didn't do an open mic or put questions in the hat. If your heart's content on that, please join the same 5 people tomorrow night in Oliver at the Frank Venables Theatre with 7 o'clock. My friends with the Asuyus Times are putting on a forum then, and they are doing an opposite forum to ours where you can write out the question and the moderator will ask it if it seems reasonable. So that's tomorrow night. Thank you again to our sponsors, South Okanagan Real Estate Board, and the Penticton Lakeside Resort for this beautiful facility, and to my friend David Priste, who does so many outstanding things for this community. Thank you again for your hospitality. I think David Priste would make a great member of Parliament, but I don't think he's interested. But we're going to have 5 really good people up here, though, who would put David to shame. Thank you to my media panel. In the newspaper world, a lot of people think I'm the important guy, and I'm not, because you hear letters to the editor, which I see a lot of people that are regulars, but actually the structure is a pyramid, and it starts with the publisher, who is in charge of everything, and then it goes circulation is on the second tier, advertising manager, editor, and then below reporters, photographers, and that sort of thing. So she's not going to appreciate me telling you this, but the Penticton Herald, we promote local. Mr. Ed Kennedy is leaving to go to Victoria, and he's being replaced by our longtime circulation manager, who's doing our timing tonight, Shannon Huggard. So congratulations to Shannon, Penn High graduate. Yeah, so I'd see Mr. Snyder taught her or whatever, and Shannon's first order of business tomorrow morning is I believe she has to fire Joe Fries and myself. So, anyways, we're going to have our closing remarks. I would like to say you hear a lot about daily and weekly newspapers and the death of print media. Well, they're going to have to take me out at gunpoint because I will fight to keep this thing going forever. And I thank anyone that subscribes or picks it up for free or reads it online, borrows it from the neighbors, takes a subscription. I appreciate each and every person that supports our product. I love you very much, and thank you. As well as traditional radio and internet news is also great. Okay, we're going to go backwards tonight. I thought those were like amazing questions and amazing answers. So she drew the card to speak last, so she gets to go first this time. So with a 60-second farewell address, our Liberal candidate, one last time, show some love for Connie Dennisuk.
Thank you very much. I believe that government has a role in making people's lives better. I've spent my life in leadership and recently completed my master's in leadership at Royal Roads University. I have the courage to care, and I've earned the reputation as a tough advocate and trusted leader. I'm ready to be your champion in Ottawa. Thank you very much for being here this evening, and thank you, James and the team. Thank you.
He drew the fourth card, so he's going to speak second. Our NDP candidate, put your hands together for Mr. Richard Cannings.
You know, people are telling me that they're looking for a better way of doing politics, a party that would put people first instead of big corporations, a government that would work across party lines to tackle climate change. And the NDP is that party. We'll stand up to big telecom companies to lower cell phone and internet charges. We'll stand up to oil and gas companies to end fossil fuel subsidies. And we'll stand up to big pharma and the insurance corporations to bring in universal pharmacare next year. And I'll finish by simply saying that it's been a tremendous honor to be your member of parliament for the last 4 years. And I offer you an experienced voice in the House of Commons. And if you're disappointed with the Liberals and you're concerned about the Conservatives, remember that the NDP is the only party in this riding that can defeat the Conservatives. So I ask for your vote on October 21st. Thank you.
All right, giving up her 60-second wrap-up address. Again, put your hands together for our Green candidate, Tara Howes.
Thank you again. Last night we actually had our first debate in the small town of Silverton up the valley, and there was comments that there are only 3 parties running right now, and those are your only 3 options. It's this exact perversion of democracy that is being perpetuated for the reason I'm standing here. There's clearly 5 of us up here, and there's also independents on this ballot. Across this riding, I have heard that people are truly ready for meaningful change. It's change for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. I believe that the people in this riding are ready, and I believe that people in this room are ready to stand up against the politics of fear and division that we have been seeing. This October, I want you to vote for something, not against it. Miigwech.
Thank you. Closing remarks for one final time at the microphone, we have our Conservative candidate, Helena Conans.
Canadians are under pressure. I'm hearing it at the doors. They're worried about their future and they're looking for help. If re-elected, Trudeau will continue tax increases, further scandals, and increase debt, and this will consume public services. The NDP have said that they will support a Trudeau minority government. The current NDP voted with the Liberals, the current NDP candidate voted with the Liberals over and over again. And if you want to look, take a look at his record, voting record. He voted with the Liberals. Raising taxes, racking up debt, making life more unaffordable. The NDP and the Liberals, this is the NDP and the Liberals' plan. A Conservative government will lower taxes and make sure you have more money in your pocket. I'm running to champion the South Okanagan West Kootenay riding, to champion you. You know I have the energy to do this. This is a big riding. Let's get ahead. Let's not just get by. Thank you.
And through the luck of the draw, he drew the last spot, and for the last word tonight, one last time, People's Party candidate, Mr. Sean Taylor.
So I said, yeah, sovereignty, economy, and environment. You know what? I'm not even going to tell you about it. It's on our website. It's been on our website for a long time. Some of these guys are poaching stuff, but they're still doing half measures, which is what they're all about, half measures, right? We're the ones, if you're a fiscal conservative, we're the only vote in town. Yeah. Something's going on. Something's going on here, and I want to stop. I want to turn it around. I think we've got a great nation. With a few course corrections, we could get back on track. Something's shifted, and I don't know what it is. You know, I've been looking, conversations with my daughter. Something's changed. I think we got a great country, right? We got to protect it.
Okay, 60 seconds extra. Go ahead.
Perfect. We've got the best tax plan. We've got the best platform. We've been called a lot of names. Okay? We're an existential threat to these guys. We're doing politics differently. Be a rebel. Go read our platform. It's been there in black and white for a long time. Right? Check us out, make your own decision. I think the policy speaks for itself, and 2019 is a question of leadership. I don't have to say anything more about Justin Trudeau that hasn't already been said. Andrew Scheer, I wouldn't choose him to lead me in song, let alone our nation. I don't know how we got here. I don't know what happened. I feel shame for not paying attention until recently, you know, but I think we got a chance to do something different here. Like I said, people are going to be surprised. Come October 21st, you're going to be surprised. On side note, nothing to do with the election, just as a public service announcement, the people in this room tonight, okay, you're obviously invested in your community. Right now, BC Ambulance Service is running a pilot project to have an advanced care paramedic in your community. This is a huge resource. They just ran it in Vernon. It's a hard stop after 3 months. If a lot of the public made a lot of noise about this, you'd probably be able to keep this service. It's a huge change in the care that's being delivered in this community right now. Make some noise and keep it. This is what I do. I fight for people. I fight for my patients. I fight for my troops, and I'll fight for you.
Thank you. A few closing remarks. Thank you, audience members, for lasting 2 hours and 5 minutes. Our Media All-Stars stand-up team, Sarah Penton, Joe Fries, Colin Dacre. And Media All-Stars, we are going to take a group photo, so come on over to the table, please. And one last round of applause. Those were really tough questions. We promote this as no softballs. These people were on the hot seat for 2 hours and 5 minutes. I want to thank them. As I said, they're great people. I'm proud to know them all. Sean Taylor, Elena Conans, Tara Howes, Connie Denisek, Richard Cannings. Thank you very much. And they will be sticking around if you want to say hello. And if you want to come down, the media will be at the Barking Parrot. Good night, folks.